Dark Goddess. She is the one who makes and unmakes us. She is the one who is there for us when there is no one there. She is the one resting deep inside us when we think we have nothing left at all. The Dark Goddess, as I said, has many names. Ereshkigal is one of them. Persephone, another. Hecate, Kali, Morgana, Black Isis, Morrigan, Mary Magdalene. And there are many, many others. To the Dark Goddess, I welcome and honour your place in my life and in the lives of all those who are here. And we light a candle for you. I write a book for you. And remember always to offer you great honour. Well, in my life, as Jane stood up here and spoke before, I've been through some really terrible times. I've been through times of depression and times where I really felt that everything was being stripped away from me, piece by piece by piece, until there was nothing left. And what I realised eventually is that actually everyone has been through those times. This is not something unique to me. It's not something even that a few of us have experienced, and most of us have experienced it actually more than once in our lives. And it began to occur to me that this is actually part of life, that this is not some great tragedy that struck me at a particular point in my life unfairly, but that this is a part of what happens to us as being human and a part of our experience. Now you might ask, as I did, upon realising that, well, if that is the case, why are we so badly prepared to meet this? Why is it that when it happens, it's out of the blue, completely beyond what we ever expected or were led to believe our lives might have as part of it? You know, why are we not taught, firstly, that this obviously will happen, that it does happen, and secondly, what to do when it does happen? So, I love myths. I've always loved them. I loved them as a child. I still love them. And in reading myths, and in that fascination that many people have for myths, and particularly myths like Persephone, if you say the word Persephone to a group of women, half the women there will say, oh, I've always loved that story. Oh, it's Persephone. What is that story again? It's so special to me. And I think we're actually fascinated and drawn to these stories that show us in myth and fairy tale, and also, of course, in modern novels, how a character can go through a time of losing everything, of being stripped to the bone, of even death or ritual death, and still come through that. Now, the most extraordinary thing about this is that you don't just come through it. There's actually something that happens down there in the bottom when there's nothing and no one and you've got no idea, where you come through it changed, reborn, you could say. And somehow the most miraculous thing is that after these most terrible times of our lives, mostly, we come through understanding something about ourselves that we never knew before. We come through more deeply committed to living our life, our truth, our power, our glory, whatever it is, our magic. And I don't think those two things are disconnected. So somehow down there in that kind of pit that feels like a disaster at the time, the Dark Goddess, in our meeting with her, is revealing, stripping away our old skin and revealing more of the essence, the truth, the essence of who we are. And for me, that experience is the Dark Goddess. Now, what I came up with is this idea that instead of waiting to be kind of grabbed by the head and pulled screaming and kicking and resisting like mad into the underworld when something's going dreadfully wrong in our lives, and that can be someone we love dies. It can be a breakdown of health of our own. It can be a tremendous disappointment, or a whole series of things sometimes collapse on us like dominoes. Instead of waiting for that to happen to discover that we don't know really how to do this process and it's all terribly difficult, and disastrous. What about if we set out deliberately and took this journey while we were still, relatively okay, and discovered some of the paths and how to do this work? Then, when it hit us out of the blue, maybe we'd know something. Maybe we'd remember some of the steps to take. We'd kind of be able to keep our eyes open a bit more and realise what was going on. And when we got to that part of facing ourselves, our nemesis or the dark goddess or our inner soul, we'd actually be awake enough to really go into that place and receive its gifts, not just happenstance as we're trying desperately to stumble out and recover our lives, but in a ritual space, a collected space, a space where we can really see that inner part of ourselves and emerge. Now, I believe that the myths are maps, essentially, that they are the teachers and that they lay out, literally step by step, how to do this process. And that's something that I've included in my book. This is work I've been working on for about 20 years. And in an experimental and a life type of a way. So I believe the maps are lying there in the myths. And the 3 myths that I've worked with in this book are the Sumerian myth of Inanna, who goes into the underworld to meet her dark sister, Ereshkigal, and 2 Greek myths, that of Persephone, the maiden who becomes the queen of the underworld, and that of Psyche, the young girl who's seeking her lover who has left her. Sorry. Another understanding that I really believe is that these myths and the descent is based on the cyclic nature of the earth and the sun and the moon. That it's not just that we go down into the underworld when we need to find something out or when we're desperate, but actually it's part of a natural cycle of life, just like a dark moon or a winter or night after day. And that bringing that consciousness and that awareness into our lives and beginning to practice that just takes off so much of the pressure and the pain and the angst, which is often felt as a very individual thing, whereas actually we all have it. And so it begins to bring in that practice. I also really deeply believe that the lack of this journeying is part of what has led our culture and our world into such crisis, with the way that the earth is treated and this expectation that everything will be light and onward and upward and outward forever and ever and ever. That the other half of the cycle, the dark half if you like, has been neglected and trampled on, and that by reinvigorating that in our own lives, reigniting it, we can begin to bring some balance back.